Imagine standing alone in the Egyptian desert over 4,000 years ago. The sun hangs above the horizon like a burning furnace. The sand beneath your feet is so hot that it feels alive. There are no air conditioners, no electric fans, no refrigerators, no bottled water. Nothing separates you from the brutal force of nature. A single mistake could cost your life. By midday, temperatures climb relentlessly. The air shimmers. The ground radiates heat in every direction. Even breathing feels like work. Now imagine trying to build a civilization here. Not a small village, not a temporary camp, an entire civilization. One of the greatest civilizations in human history. A civilization that constructed colossal pyramids, massive temples, and cities that survived for thousands of years. How? Because by every modern expectation, ancient Egypt should never have existed. Most people picture Egypt as a land of golden monuments and powerful pharaohs. But behind those famous images was a far more important reality: survival. Every morning, millions of people face the same challenge. How do you stay alive in one of the harshest environments on Earth? And somehow, generation after generation, they succeeded. Not only did they survive, they flourished. Which raises a fascinating question. What did the ancient Egyptians know that allowed them to thrive, where others would struggle to endure even a few days? The answer begins with a surprising contradiction. Egypt was both one of the most dangerous places to live and one of the safest. The big question. Today, more than half of humanity lives in cities protected by technology. If temperatures become unbearable, we turn on air conditioning. If water becomes scarce, infrastructure brings it to us. Ancient Egyptians had none of those advantages. Yet their civilization endured for over 3,000 years, longer than many modern nations have even existed. How did they accomplish something that seems almost impossible? And more importantly, could their solutions reveal something about human survival that we've forgotten? To answer that question, we need to travel back to the beginning, back to a world shaped by heat, drought, and an unforgiving landscape. The world before. From space, Egypt looks like a miracle, a narrow ribbon of green cutting through an endless ocean of desert. To the west lies the Sahara. To the east, vast, arid wilderness. For hundreds of miles, scorching landscapes stretched toward the horizon. Rainfall was rare. Sometimes entire years passed with almost no rain at all. For most ancient societies, this would have been a disaster. Water determined everything. Without water, crops fail. Without crops, populations collapse. Without populations, civilizations disappear. Yet Egypt became one of the most stable civilizations in history. At first glance, this makes no sense. Why build cities in such a hostile environment? Why settle where the sun seemed determined to drive people away? The answer flowed quietly through the center of the country, the Nile River. Ancient Egyptians called it the giver of life. And for good reason. Every year, the river flooded its banks. When the waters receded, they left behind rich black soil. Suddenly, fields could grow wheat, barley, vegetables, and fruit. Life flourished where death should have dominated. But the Nile solved only one problem: water. The heat remained. The desert remained. The danger remained. Every day, ordinary Egyptians still had to work, travel, build, and survive under conditions that could quickly become deadly. Farmers spent hours beneath the sun. Builders hauled enormous stones. Merchants crossed exposed landscapes. Children played in temperatures that would send many modern people indoors. So how did they do it? How did an entire civilization adapt to conditions that seem almost unlivable? The answer wasn't a single invention. It wasn't a secret machine. And it wasn't luck. It was something far more remarkable. Over thousands of years, Egyptians developed an extraordinary understanding of their environment. They learned how to work with the desert instead of fighting against it. And that knowledge would become one of the greatest survival systems ever created by human beings. But their first breakthrough came from an unexpected discovery, one that transformed heat from an enemy into something they could outsmart. The discovery or change. For thousands of years, ancient Egyptians faced a challenge that never disappeared. Every morning, the desert returned. The heat returned. The relentless sun returned. And yet, somehow, life continued. The breakthrough wasn't a single invention. It was a collection of discoveries that slowly transformed survival into an art. The first clue came from something surprisingly simple: mud. At first glance, mud seems insignificant, certainly not the kind of material that changes history. But along the Nile River, ancient Egyptians discovered that mixing mud with straw created a remarkable building material. When dried beneath the sun, these mud bricks became strong, durable, and incredibly effective at resisting heat. Researchers believe this may have been one of the most important environmental adaptations in Egyptian history, because while stone monuments dominate modern images of Egypt, most ordinary Egyptians did not live inside pyramids. They lived inside mud brick homes, and those homes behaved almost like natural air conditioners. During the day, thick walls absorbed heat slowly. The interior remained significantly cooler than the outside air. At night, when desert temperatures dropped, the stored heat gradually escaped. Without electricity, without machinery, without modern technology. They had created passive cooling thousands of years before the concept even existed. But buildings alone could not solve every problem. People still needed to work. Fields still needed tending, crops still needed harvesting, construction projects still demanded labor. The Egyptians responded with another clever adaptation: time. Rather than fighting the hottest hours of the day, they organized much of life around them. Work often began early in the morning. Activity slowed during periods of intense afternoon heat. Many tasks resumed later when temperatures became more manageable. It sounds obvious today. Yet this simple strategy dramatically reduced the dangers of heat exposure. Instead of forcing nature to obey them, Egyptians adjusted themselves to nature. And that mindset appeared again and again throughout their civilization. The human story. Imagine being a farmer along the Nile nearly 4,000 years ago. Before sunrise, you wake to cool morning air. The sky glows faintly over the river. You know exactly what awaits you. Hours of labor, fields stretching toward the horizon, the ever-present threat of heat. You carry water. You cover your skin. You understand the rhythms of the land because your survival depends on them. By midday, the world transforms. The air becomes heavy. The sunlight feels almost physical. Mistakes become dangerous. Exhaustion arrives quickly. Yet generations of Egyptians learned to recognize these risks. Parents taught children, farmers taught apprentices. Knowledge passed from one generation to the next, not through textbooks, through experience, through observation, through survival. And perhaps that was their greatest advantage. They didn't see themselves as separate from the environment. They saw themselves as part of it. The desert was not an enemy to conquer. It was a reality to understand. The science. Modern archaeology continues to reveal just how sophisticated these adaptations were. Archaeologists have found evidence that many Egyptian homes were designed to maximize airflow. Narrow streets often created shade. Courtyards encouraged cooling breezes. Building materials reduced heat transfer. Researchers believe that these techniques significantly lowered indoor temperatures compared to the surrounding environment. Evidence also suggests that clothing played an important role. Ancient Egyptians commonly wore lightweight linen garments. Linen allowed heat to escape while helping protect skin from direct sunlight. Even the color and texture of clothing influenced comfort beneath the desert sun. Anthropologists point out that human beings are remarkably adaptable creatures. Given enough time, societies develop solutions tailored to their environments. Ancient Egypt may represent one of history's greatest examples of this process, because survival was never dependent on one invention. It emerged from thousands of small decisions accumulating across generations. The consequences. Those decisions changed everything. The ability to manage extreme heat allowed larger populations to thrive. Agriculture expanded, cities grew, trade flourished, monumental architecture became possible. Without these survival strategies, the Egypt we know today might never have existed. The pyramids, the temples, the pharaohs. All depended upon a society capable of enduring conditions that should have limited human settlement. Powerful ending. When most people look at ancient Egypt, they see stone, pyramids, statues, monuments. But those achievements were only the visible result of something deeper. A civilization that learned how to survive where survival seemed unlikely. The real wonder of ancient Egypt was not that they built great structures. It was that they first learned how to live beneath one of the most unforgiving suns on Earth. And perhaps that's why their story still matters today, because the greatest human breakthroughs are not always acts of conquest. Sometimes they begin with something far simpler: learning how to adapt, learning how to endure, and learning how to thrive in a world that was never designed to make survival easy.